In 2007, Nokia's engineers got their hands on the very first iPhone. They studied it. They tested it. They ran it through every benchmark, and then they called it a toy. Nokia controlled 40% of every mobile phone sold on Earth. They had survived wars, recessions, and every competitor who had ever tried to unseat them. They were not just the biggest phone company, they were the phone company. Within 5 years, Nokia's mobile division was sold for next to nothing. The empire was gone. And the most painful part of this story is not that they failed to build a smartphone. It is that they built one, and then chose not to release it. Autopsy verdict. Most people frame the Nokia story as a technology failure. A company that could not keep up with the iPhone. That framing lets Nokia off too easily. Nokia had touchscreen prototypes before Apple. They had app stores before Apple. They had the engineers, the patents, and the market position to dominate smartphones. What they lacked was not technology. It was the courage to disrupt themselves. To understand how Nokia fell, you first have to understand how completely it ruled. Nokia was founded in 1865 in Finland, not as a phone company, as a paper mill. For over a century, it made paper, then rubber boots, then cables, then televisions. By the 1990s, Nokia had pivoted into mobile phones. By 1998, Nokia was the single most valuable brand in Europe, not the most valuable phone brand. The most valuable brand, period. Nokia 3310 became the best-selling mobile phone in history. Affordable, reliable, indestructible, the phone your grandmother could use and your teenager could not break. By 2007, the year the iPhone launched, Nokia controlled 40% of the global mobile phone market. They sold more phones before lunch on a Tuesday than most companies sold in a year. The market they operated in was enormous and growing. 3 billion people would own a mobile phone by 2010. Nokia was positioned to sell a phone to nearly every one of them. They had the manufacturing scale, the distribution network, the brand recognition, and the patent portfolio. They had partnerships with every major carrier on Earth. On paper, Nokia was untouchable. In practice, they were standing in the path of something they did not fully understand and refused to take seriously. Autopsy verdict. They were not complacent. They invested over 30% of revenue into R&D. They saw smartphones coming. The problem was not that Nokia did not know. The problem was that the people who knew could not get the people who decided to listen. Nokia's dominance was not built on luck. It was built on 3 compounding advantages that no competitor could easily replicate. First, hardware manufacturing at scale. Nokia had invested decades building the most efficient phone manufacturing operation on Earth. They could produce a phone at a cost their competitors could not match. When a market is growing fast, the company that can make the most product at the lowest cost wins. Nokia won that game completely. Second, the carrier relationships. In the early mobile era, phone carriers, Vodafone, T-Mobile, AT&T controlled everything. They decided which phones went on their shelves. Nokia had spent 20 years building relationships with every major carrier in every major market. Those relationships were worth billions and took years to build. A new entrant could not replicate them overnight. Third, the Symbian operating system. Nokia's phones ran on software called Symbian. It was powerful, efficient, and had been refined over 15 years. Nokia had built an ecosystem of developers, apps, and services around Symbian. It was not perfect, but it worked, and millions of developers knew how to build on it. Together, these created a moat, and then Apple crossed it in 18 months. The iPhone did not compete on Nokia's terms. It changed the terms entirely. Apple did not go through carriers. They negotiated directly with AT&T and kept control of the entire experience. Nokia's carrier relationships suddenly became a disadvantage. Apple did not use Symbian. They built iOS from scratch and opened it to developers with the App Store. Nokia's ecosystem became a legacy problem overnight. Apple did not make a phone. They made a computer that happened to make calls. Nokia was still making a better phone. Apple had already moved on to asking what a phone could become. Autopsy verdict. The thing that nobody talks about in this story is how rational Nokia's decisions looked at the time. Their moat was real. Their advantages were real. A company with 40% market share and the world's best manufacturing operation does not throw that away to chase an unproven new product format. Every financial model they ran told them to protect the core business. The problem is that financial models cannot measure the speed of cultural shifts. And the iPhone was not just a product launch, it was a cultural moment. In 2004, Nokia had the 7710. It had a touch display and a browser. It had a large touch display. It had a browser. It could run third-party applications. Leadership decided the market was not ready. They were wrong. But here is where the story gets more complicated than most people realize. The decision not to push the touchscreen smartphone was not made by one person out of arrogance. The decision was made by a committee. Every incentive in the system pointed toward making more phones faster and cheaper. The structure of the company made the wrong decision feel like the right one. Then there was the software problem. Symbian was powerful for feature phones, but it was not built for touchscreens or apps at the scale Apple was imagining. Rebuilding the entire software platform would take years and cost billions. Nokia tried. They invested in a new platform called MeGo. It was promising, but it took too long, cost too much, and kept getting deprioritized every time a quarterly earnings report came in below expectations. Meanwhile, Apple was shipping iPhones. Google launched Android in 2008 and gave it away free to every phone manufacturer on Earth. Samsung, HTC, and LG all adopted Android and started building smartphones at Nokia's scale but with Apple's software advantage. Nokia was being attacked from above by Apple and from below by Android simultaneously. In 2010, CEO Stephen Elop sent an internal memo. "We are standing on a burning platform," he wrote. Autopsy verdict. Nokia did not fail because they were arrogant. They failed because their organizational structure made it impossible to act on what their engineers already knew. That is a different kind of failure, and a far more frightening one. Because it can happen to any company, no matter how talented the people inside it are. In 2007, Nokia's value was $110 billion. In 2012, it had fallen to $8 billion. Microsoft acquired the division in 2013. One Nokia engineer put it simply, "We knew what needed to happen. We just could not make it happen fast enough." Nokia's greatest strength became its greatest trap. This is the innovator's dilemma, and Nokia is its most perfect expression. There are 3 lessons every leader and every founder should take from this. First, know the difference between your product and your purpose. Second, build organizations where the people who know can reach those who decide. Third, ask, if we were starting this company today with nothing, what would we build? Nokia stopped asking that in 2003. That is the difference between an empire that endures and an empire that gets autopsied. See you at the next dissection. A new empire dissected every week. Subscribe so you never miss one.